Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination and the still as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and this is Robservations episode number 815. And you know, it's not a show unless I can promote some swag, things I've got back in the stores. And as you know, if you collect physical media, Kino Lorber last week re-released for the very first time in 4K. Well, 4K with a brand new transfer, supervised by director of photography Newton Thomas Siegel. Tom to his friends. The Usual Suspects is out in a brand new 4K transfer. And why is this significant? Well, when they did the 2-disc DVD special edition, I, along with the great filmmaker Carrie David, and filmmaker Dave Parker, we produced the special features that are on this disc that have been out of print for 21 years. And we had to get all the suspects back and interview everyone, and very proud of those special features. And they're all on this disc for the first time in 21 years. So if you are a physical media fan, check it out. Tell them I sent you. God bless Kino Lorber. When it comes to their 4K releases, they're doing the Lord's work. I always knew that was going to be the case, especially when I saw that tasty Hannibal transfer, Ridley Scott's Hannibal. Love that. So anyway, a glorious day, friends. A glorious day. Sandman was renewed. That's right. Neil Gaiman's Sandman, based on my favorite comic book of all time. Although I've been reading about a lot of people reassessing the comic, and people are saying it's not as good as they thought. You're wrong. I love the Sandman. I love the mythology. But most of all, I love the fact that the Sandman is a comic book that was about storytelling itself. Now, there's been a lot of people that have talked about how that the Sandman was just another example of woke storytelling and all that. And I would say to those people, no. The Sandman was always woke. Author Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite writers, came out of the whole London the London punk cabaret art scene. He was around all kinds of. If you work in the arts, it's like a traveling gypsy caravan of all kinds of people from all walks of life that are very open to all different kinds of alternative lifestyles. You have to be. If you're involved in the arts at any level, you know what I'm talking about. Well, that's where Neil Gaiman was coming from. And the show is always about LGBTQ people who lived on the fringes of society, all kinds of strange folk. And I have to tell you, I thought that the Sandman series was one of the finest comic book adaptations of all time. And there's a lot of people that didn't like it because they had to make certain changes. The first 7 issues of Sandman Neil Gaiman was kind of finding his way in the story. And so there was a lot of references to DC Comics characters. And also, it was part of their Vertigo line. So it was supposed to be a horror comic. And so Neil Gaiman, for the first 7 issues, was kind of trying to find his way. And in my mind, and that the beginning of Sandman has been collected as Preludes and Nocturnes, which is the beginning, the first group of stories of Sandman. And Preludes and Nocturnes all the way up through issue 8 of Sandman. They did that through the first 6 episodes. They really kind of, it was almost, sometimes it was 2 issues an episode. And for the first season of Sandman, they adapted 18 issues of the comic. They did Preludes and Nocturnes, and they did the Doll's House storyline. And they even did 2 episodes of The Dream Country, The Dream of a Thousand Cats, the animated episode. They did that, and it was great. It was great to see that. I really enjoyed that they did that. So the big question was, would they renew Sandman? Would people want to come back? And it did very, very well. And it's an expensive show to make, obviously, because it has a lot of locations, a lot of special effects. So, I was hoping against all hope that it would get renewed, mostly because I'm selfish, and my favorite Sandman story would comprise hopefully the majority of the second season. And I wanted to read this article in Deadline. Many of you have already read it, but I figured I would read it anyway. Netflix has greenlit a second season of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. Deadline understands that the streamer is bringing back the comic book adaptation after various conflicting reports started to surface online. The Sandman, which launched at the start of August, was watched for 69.5 million hours. That's right, 69.5 million hours in its first week, doubling this in its second to 127.5 million hours, scoring 77.2 million in its third week, and getting 53.8 million in its fourth. The renewal confirmation follows an accidental leak on Wednesday by DC Comics' official Twitter page. The since-deleted tweet read, "The dream continues. The Sandman will return with new episodes based on multiple volumes of the Neil Gaiman graphic novel to explore even more stories of the endless." It came after cancellation rumors started circulating on social media, with Gaiman calling out a fake Twitter account. The 10-episode series, based on Gaiman's DC Comics series of the same name, follows Morpheus, the personification of dreams and one of the 7 Endless, is captured in an occult ritual in 1619. After being held captive for 106 years, Dream, also Tom Sturridge, escapes and sets out to restore order to his realm, the Dreaming. Other series stars included Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian, Vivienne, I can't even say this last name, Archimpong as Lucienne, Patton Oswalt as the voice of Matthew the Raven, David Thewlis as John Dee, Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer Morningstar, Janet Coleman as Joanna Constantine, and Kirby Howell-Baptiste as Death, among others. Now, there was a lot of people that criticized some of the casting and some of the gender and race swapping, which I always kind of thought was odd, considering that it was established in the comic and in the series itself that when the Endless first walked on Earth, they went where the humans were, which was Africa. So part of the Sandman, and in the comics, the Sandman appears as a black man early on in his corporeal existence on Earth. And they even show you that in the series. So the fact that they had Death, who was portrayed originally in the comic as a pale white girl, British punk, the fact that they race swapped her with a black actress, a lot of people had a problem with it. I didn't. She was fan-fucking-tastic, even though I can't pronounce her name. Kirby Howell-Baptiste played Death, and she was phenomenal. And, if you read the comics, I mean, I understand the character of Death was iconic for a lot of people, but that didn't bother me. And the fact that Gwendolyn Christie was cast as Lucifer Morningstar didn't bother me either. Fallen Angel, what's the problem? I thought she was great as Lucifer. And then also Lucienne, it was Lucian in the comics, his librarian. And they, you go back to House of Secrets and all that. It didn't bother me because Vivienne and Achimpong, she was great. She was great as Lucienne. She was awesome. And I can't imagine the show being better cast than it was. And the fact that, okay, we don't have John Constantine because that's not a character that Gaiman created, but we brought back Joanna Constantine, played a larger role. And some people said, well, I would have liked to have seen John Constantine. Well, that's why it's an adaptation. And I thought they did a fantastic job. A surprise bonus episode of the show was released in August featuring favorite stories from Neil Gaiman's graphic novels A Dream of a Thousand Cats and Calliope, featuring guest appearances by Sandra Oh, James McAvoy, David Tennant, and Michael Sheen. So here's the great thing about that. So The Dream of a Thousand Cats and Calliope were the first 2 issues of The Dream Country. And The Dream Country was a 4 issue arc. However, I would imagine that the last of those 4 issues, Facade, might not be adapted only because it has a character that's very much like Metamorpho, which is a DC hero. And there was a female version of Metamorpho in the story. And that issue was called Facade. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually drop that. They might not, though. They might not. But what that means is one of the most famous Sandman stories of all was issue 19 of the Sandman, which is where, if you asked your Uncle Bob, and I know you will, how would they start it? I think they would start it with one of the most famous Sandman stories, A Midsummer Night's Dream. And A Midsummer Night's Dream is a lovely story, a beautiful story about the first time Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, who we met in the Hobgadling episode. We see Shakespeare, and Shakespeare plays a part throughout the series in various ways. And A Midsummer Night's Dream is a wonderful story. I would imagine that, I won't get into what happens in the story, but they could do an entire episode of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I think that's what they would do, replacing Facade, which is the 4th and final story in the Dream Country, which leads into, right after the Dream Country is over, excuse me, it leads into the beginning of my very favorite Sandman story of the entire run. I mean, I love the Sandman, but the entire run, my favorite story is, of course, A Season of Mists, in which a family reunion occasions certain personal revelations or recriminations. Assorted events are set in motion, and a relationship thought to be long done with proves to have much relevance today. Ooh, that is the prelude to Season of Mists. And then, of course, you have A Season of Mists 1. What is the story? We already saw that the Sandman, when he was a black man walking the sands of Africa, he had a girlfriend. He took on a lover, and she sort of spurned him. And to punish her, he sent her to hell for 10,000 years. And basically, the Endless, the family, Dream's family, basically tells him he's a dick at this dinner party. And as a result of that, they say, look, you're a dick. You imprisoned this woman you love, this woman who loved you. You imprisoned her, you damned her to hell for 10,000 years just because your ego was hurt. So Dream decides to make things right. And obviously, we saw him confront Lucifer Morningstar, Gwendolyn Christie, and going back to hell could be not good for the Sandman. But to make good and to do the right thing and release his lady friend from hell, from her 10,000-year imprisonment, Dream goes back to hell, and it might be the end of him. He doesn't know. And when he gets there, hell's empty. Everyone's gone. All the souls of the damned, they've gone, scattered to the 4 winds. And there is Lucifer Morningstar at the gates of hell. And Lucifer tells him, I'm tired of being the first of the fallen. I'm tired of being Lucifer Morningstar. I'm leaving. And guess what, Dream? Hell is yours. And here's the key. And Lucifer Morningstar disappears. and dream with the key to hell, the most valuable psychic real estate of all creation, goes back to his realm to figure out, well, what am I going to do with the key to hell? And suddenly, people start arriving on his doorstep. All the gods of myth, the Norse gods, the Egyptian gods, the Japanese gods, all the gods. Even angels that are sent as emissaries from the big man himself. They all show up at Dream's realm, and they all have a good reason why they should be given the key to hell. And the story goes from there, and I won't tell you any more. But it's a long-form story. It'll be multiple episodes. It might even take up the whole season. I don't know. But if they do another 18 episodes, it'll probably take up half the season. All I can tell you is that I am deliriously excited to see Sandman Season 2. I'm so happy for Neil Gaiman and the crew. And Mason Alexander Park, who plays Desire. Mason, can't wait to see more of you. You knock it out of the park. So that's very exciting. Very, very, very excited about this. So, you know what else I'm excited about? I'm excited about, and a lot of you might not have heard of this, but you know, the Chinese have been making a lot of crazy science fiction lately, and Netflix picked up The Wandering Earth. I don't know if any of you saw the epic Chinese science fiction film, The Wandering Earth, based on the novel by the author of The Three-Body Problem that Weiss and Benioff are apparently adapting now. If you haven't read The Three-Body Problem series, why haven't you? It's one of the great science fiction novels of the modern age, or actually 3 science fiction novels, but check it out. So Netflix just picked up this goodness, and this is, of course, Warriors of the Future. Hot Toys is already making action figures of these guys, but Warriors of the Future looks to be another, really, it's got monsters, it's got mecha, it's got crazy battles, it's got massive urban destruction, it's got some alien presence, who knows? I haven't seen it, but Netflix picked it up. So can't wait to see it. I mean, I went and saw Wandering Earth in the theater, and to be honest, I didn't love The Wandering Earth. I loved watching it. I love going to see it in a theater. And if, of course, this shows up, Warriors of the Future shows up in a theater, I'm going to run and see that. But that's very, very, very exciting. So I think that's pretty crazy. People are already sending in super chats. And Mr. 47 asks, have you pre-ordered God of War Ragnarok, Rob? Which edition? I just got the regular edition of God of War. Just ordered the regular edition. Roberto Suarez, who is doing, well, we're going to have a new title because a lot of you complained, but Latin X-Men is going to be changed to something else more palatable for all of you people. Somebody said that the term Latinx or Latinx is just as offensive as the N-word. I'm like, what? As Roberto told me, it was created actually by Puerto Rican scholars. So I hardly think it was that offensive. But okay. Anyway, we'll change that name. And Mr. 47 is a new member. Thanks for becoming a member, Mr. 47 of the channel. And the Il Yankee became a member of the channel as well. For those of you who don't know, we have member chats every other weekend, and we will have a membership chat this Saturday if you're a member of the channel. And what we do is we just all hang out. Usually the member chats, I mean, I always want them to go slow, or not go slow. Don't take as long, but we always end up going for like 3 or 4 hours. And you can ask me anything. We can hang out and chat, and you can say what you want, and we just have lots of fellowship. Anybody who wants to be a part of it can come on in. But thank you for that. So, yeah, if you have questions or anything, both the tips and the super chats are open, and I think everything is okay. Stub McShave said he sent me some super chats and tips, both, and they didn't show up. Either way, they're working. Polaris Sucks. Are you talking about the X-Men? Is a member of the channel. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Now, got to tell you, we talked about this on the John Campy Show. Obviously, a new trailer for Avatar: The Way of Water dropped today. I'm an unabashed Avatar fan. I don't understand why people aren't. It's incredible filmmaking. People are like, well, Rob, it's Fern Gully. It's Pocahontas. It's Dances with Wolves. It's whatever. I know. James Cameron is a classicist. He's telling meat and potatoes classical tales through his own filter. Why people bet against him, I don't know. I think the Way of Water looks spectacular. Frankly, I will go see it. The underwater motion capture looks to be stunning. The world of Pandora looks even more detailed and more fully realized than it was back in 2009. So I'm very excited. And also, as I said on the John Campea show, it looks like there might be a little Solaris vibe. I always thought that he was leaning into Gaia theory. John Campea pointed out that was like Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. But I would say it goes even back further to Stanislaw Lem's novel Solaris that has been adapted twice, once by the great Andrei Tarkovsky and once by Steven Soderbergh, a movie that James Cameron also produced. So Pandora's alive. That's what Voltan would say if he was over. If Brian Blessed moved from Flash Gordon over to Avatar. You never know, but that's kind of what I was thinking. That maybe we're gonna find out. That's why Sigourney Weaver, who plays the daughter of Neytiri and Jake Sully, that is actually Sigourney Weaver reborn. I don't know how they're gonna play that, but that is her. So that's very, very exciting. Really like that. Now, what I wanted to talk about, so like I like Avatar. I'm really excited for it. I know it's so hip to not like it or whatever, and people talk about. I just think it's so funny because I saw that movie in a IMAX 3D theater, and it was unbelievably captivating, and I was thoroughly transported by it. So, I really enjoyed it. I really loved Avatar, and I own 2 versions of it. I have a 3D version of it, and I have the extended version of it on Blu-ray. And I really enjoy it. And every time I've ever seen it, I enjoy it. So what can I say? And now here's another. Now the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about. So there has been talk over the last couple of years. Filmmakers have come out, and they have said derogatory things. The most recent one was James Cameron. James Cameron talking about bashing on the movies that are making money now, bashing on comic book films, and because Avatar 2, The Way of Water, is clearly about family. He even made a comment saying that these superhero movies don't have characters that are growing up. He said they're essentially teenagers. And obviously, we who are fans of this stuff know. I mean, I think one of the great depictions, one of the things I loved most in all of the Infinity Saga was the opening of Endgame, when Hawkeye lost his family. I mean, I thought that was a brilliant way to open that film. All of his family was snapped, and we'd seen something like that, like Carrie Coon's character in The Leftovers. We saw what kind of pain a human being can face losing their family like that. And I thought they did a really great job leaning into that. And we've had a lot of families, I mean, in the MCU. So I thought that was kind of look, I get it. James has 5 kids now. As he gets older, you become a parent and you think differently. But I just, it doesn't mean that superhero movies are somehow terrible or something. But I think that then what happens is there's a pile-on of fans. I mean, look, I've been a fan my whole life, but just because somebody says, whether it's Martin Scorsese, whether it's James Cameron, or whether it's anybody else, the latest in a long line of people, these filmmakers are upset not at comic book films per se. What they're upset about is that our media diet and the movies that studios, if you go back and you look at what the studio output was in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the aughts, before the rise of spectacle filmmaking, when the studios only made tentpole IP-driven films, there was a wide variety and a wide diversity of stories being told, all different kinds of stories. And that has gone away. And I think what the filmmakers are frustrated by, I mean, obviously, it has been counterbalanced by what we're seeing on streaming, long-form streaming shows. The Sandman itself is a show. They tried to make the Sandman into a film for the longest time. I must have read 10 different drafts of the Sandman feature film. It never worked. they could never distill what Neil Gaiman was doing in the comic into a 2-hour or 3-hour movie. Couldn't be done. That's why I was so happy to see what they did with the show, what they did with the series, and for all the changes they had to make, it was an incredibly faithful adaptation to the comics. But not even that was perfect. The 24-hour story with John Dee going into the diner, I like the original comic version of it better than what they did. I understand what they were trying to do in the series, but I didn't think it was as well. I didn't think it worked as well, but it was still good. But that's what adaptation is. You can't make things exactly like, especially when you're translating from one medium to another. You know, it's like the reason comic book characters don't wear the costumes they wear on the printed page. They wouldn't look good. And what's really interesting is I think for the most part, Marvel has done a wonderful job translating their comic book costumes into big screen costumes. They've done an amazing job doing it. The comics, I mean, and I think the master class of doing that was in the original Captain America. They've leaned into they gave him the USO tour suit, which was the classic comic suit, so we got that. But then we got an iteration when he was fighting in World War II of a uniform that was functional on the battlefield, but also was recognizably Captain America. And then as we've seen what he was wearing in the Avengers, then moving through the rest of the Infinity Saga, all the way up to Infinity War and Endgame, the Cap costume evolved. I mean, that was a great iteration of the costume. And what Sam Wilson's wearing now, right out of the costume, right out of the comics. The costume is right out of the comics. And really, really, really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed that. So, Rogue Thinker says in the chats, did every character in the Sandman have to be alternate sexuality? Sure, it had been there, but everyone, well, not everyone was, but pretty faithful to the original comic. There was a lot of, and that was because part of what the Sandman dealt with was alternative lifestyles. But I can understand. I mean, I guess it didn't really bother me because it was kind of right out of the comic, and it wasn't all like that. Like, we saw regular relationships as well, but it was always kind of like that. Kurt Pullen says he sends in a super chat and says, Rob, love your work. Horror has been crushing it lately. Smile, Hellraiser, Barbarian, Pearl. Wondering if you have a recent face. If I have a recent face? This is my most recent face. You're looking at it right now. Maybe, did you mean to say favorite? I think, I really enjoyed Barbarian a lot. I'd read the script. I thought it was good. Hellraiser I thought was okay. I wish it was a little bit better. Smile I really liked, but again, I didn't love it. But it was good, and we're getting a lot of horror films that are good and they're working for people. And Terrifier 2, I mean, to me, gratuitously fun. I don't know why, but it has nothing to do with it, but it reminded me of the first time I watched Blood-Sucking Freaks. But yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of great horror. But I prefer my horror a little bit more elevated. But when I hate that term, but I love horror that has a philosophy. You know what I got? This came today, finally. I got my my Videodrome, my 4K Videodrome. And one of my favorite things in this movie in particular is one of the characters is talking to Max Wren about Videodrome, and she says that Videodrome is dangerous because Videodrome has a philosophy. And that's kind of how I feel about horror films. I really like horror films that have more of a philosophical bent. That's why movies like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby are some of my favorites. And I want to get into this whole thing with movies because I have more to say about this. Alan Jara 91 says, you think Namor will be a big deal after Black Panther 2? I would imagine so. I mean, I've only seen a few clips with him in it where he speaks. I like them, though. I really like what they've done with Talocan, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. So we'll see. I think he probably will if people like him. He looks like a badass to me. Duber Squad says, I hope Black Panther 2's CGI is as good as Avatar: The Way of Water, but I doubt it. No one is on James Cameron's level. Well, I think you're probably right about that. I mean, the motion capture, the underwater motion capture, just looking at people diving into the water, you can see they had real people diving into water. You can tell because the way bodies go from out of the water into the water, I can't even imagine trying to animate that, but it looks absolutely spot on. I can't. I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. But it's funny because people are talking about, well, it looks like a video game. Remember, our technology has progressed so far, but now we just take everything for granted. But it's still very difficult to do. And I think what was going on, what we saw in that Avatar 2 trailer today, was absolutely astonishing. I really did. Wait, Harold Rand in the chat says there's a new Toho Godzilla movie. They teased it coming out 11/3/23. Ooh, I loved Shin Godzilla. If you guys want to watch a great Toho Godzilla movie, Shin Godzilla is the shit. It's the bomb diggity. Yo. Really liked it a lot. Mista47 says, I miss Movie Club. Sucks John doesn't think too highly of it. Celebrating great films while also introducing them to new fans like Ray Ora was dope. Hey, Mr. 47, I don't know. I mean, I know that, John, it's hard when, John, we expect shows to get a certain level of views, and when they don't. I mean, I really liked doing Movie Club. I really wish we would have delved into a lot more obscure titles. On this channel, Elizabeth and I, we keep meaning to start it up. We're going to start up this weekend. We did a show called Whining About Movies, where the two of us share a bottle of wine and talk about a movie that we watched recently. And we go into, I think we did 150 episodes already, but now I've got more technology to add. So we're both going to have microphones now, which will be good. And I got a mixing board and all that. So technically it'll be a better show. So that's going to be fun. So we're going to be doing that if you want to watch something like that, but we're going to be doing that. Now, I wanted to talk more about the kinds of movies that we're seeing and what the filmmakers who are complaining, like Martin Scorsese and James Cameron, about comic book movies. Now, there is a film journalist, a film pundit, a film writer that I've been reading for a quarter century. He's a pretty divisive figure. People either love him or hate him, or people love to hate him, or people really like him. I think he's a terrific writer. He's kind of a curmudgeon, but I really enjoy his writing. And I know some people might not like him, but I really do. And I've liked him for a long time. He was actually very complimentary when the only movie I directed came out, Free Enterprise. And I've seen him over the years, and I really enjoy reading him. Then that is Jeffrey Wells and his column over at HollywoodElsewhere.com. That's Hollywood-Elsewhere.com. And he has, you read the comments on his articles, and you'll see. But regardless of what you think of Jeffrey, he's a great writer, and he passionately loves film. And he is not a big fan, like a lot of these filmmakers are, he thinks along the lines, I mean, Jeffrey, as I do, think of a cinema as a church, almost. It is a holy place. And it should be filled with stories that illuminate the human truths of life, that reflect back on us the great truths that sometimes we don't want to admit, and that we need great movies to point us in the direction. And there was an article that he published back in March 21st. Just a quick blurb. He was talking about it earlier today in his column, but he referred back to it. And he wrote this on March 21st, 2014. And he says, "Don't forget what's happening. Even with my admiration of Captain America, the Winter Soldier, I still loathe and despise fanboy movies," he writes. "I just don't see what's to be gained by smiling and winking at them and going, well, at least they're selling popcorn. Fanboy flicks are a profitable malignancy. They are well on the way to kicking real adult-level movies out of mainstream cinemas and into VOD streaming and other home viewing options altogether. He wasn't wrong, by the way. Remember, he wrote this 8 years ago, March 21st, 2014. Super amped fanboy flicks are the latest manifestation of the corporate influence which Pauline Kael noticed in 1980 and wrote about it in her famous Why Are the Movies So Bad? Or The Numbers piece in The New Yorker. They're flagships of a trend that are coming closer and closer to suffocating a mainstream movie culture that used to at least occasionally be about mirroring or capturing who we were, our values, needs, hopes, and how we lived. Theaters used to be the equivalent of community churches, places for inner communion and contemplation. But fanboy flicks are turning them into the spiritual equivalent of roller rinks and amusement parks. Fanboy flicks are a metaphor for the overall devolution of art and culture, not just in this country, but all across Europe and Asia. They are injections of corporate heroin, and Hollywood is the dealer. They are not pathways into our common histories and values and deep down places. They are things we shoot into our minds and souls, but they are obviously inorganic. They're not herbal tea or pot or peyote. They aren't even Valium or Xanax. They're Demerol. Yo, man, that is a stunning, that is a takedown. But you can see how Jeffrey Wells writes. Well, what was interesting was, as I followed him back to this particular thing he posted, again, back on March 21st, 2014, he had Pauline Kael's article, Why Are Movies So Bad? Or The Numbers. Now, I am a huge Pauline Kael worshiper. One of the last things John Schnepp and I did together was there was a movie bookstore, I think it was called Movie World, in Burbank, and they closed. I've been going there for years and years, and they closed, and we went in there on the last day it was open, and I bought some books, and one of the books I bought was a book of about a 1,500-page book of Pauline Kael's reviews. Pauline Kael was a very famous film writer, and she was a very learned woman, and she liked a lot of things I liked. She didn't like a lot of things I liked, so she was not somebody, I mean, she was a true film journalist. She was writing from a position of culture, a position of knowledge. And I mean, not to criticize my fellow film pundits and reviewers. I mean, I very much enjoy watching Jeremy John's review. I really enjoy watching Chris Stuckman's reviews. I do. I enjoy watching Dan Murrell. I think, and of course, Drew McWeeny, I always thought was a great writer, both back in the old Ain't It Cool News days and then on his own. He's a tremendous writer, and you can see him on that David Fincher series Voir talking about Lawrence of Arabia. So we have a lot of great film writers, but here's the thing. The film writers, all of the people that are reviewing movies today, and this is not a criticism, but are less cultured than the days of yore. And they have less academic background. They've seen a lot of the time less movies, and especially certainly not as much world cinema. And their insights are not as wildly, I mean, the people that used to write about movies, and maybe I'm just because I grew up, I mean, when you read Roger Ebert, I mean, these were these guys, and read Roger Ebert's books, the great movies. But they just knew so much about so many different kinds of things. And I think a lot of it came out of living in cities like New York and Chicago, the great American cities that, not that LA isn't a great American city, but LA is very different than New York. But I went and looked this up. I'd never read this Pauline Kael article. And in reading it, it's very interesting. So it's a long article. I don't think I'll share the whole thing, but I do want to send you off with some of this article. And it was written on June 23rd, 1980. and I wanted to share it with you. Hang on, but first let me catch up here. Mr. 47 said, "Oh, I talked about Movie Club." Insamatic 101 says, "Rob, what are your honest thoughts on the movie industry? By 2027, how do you see the landscape? Will theaters always survive? Is streaming the way?" Mandor Ruiz 619 says, "Yo, Rob, how are you?" I'll tell you what are my honest thoughts on the movie industry. Hang on, I think there's something else I missed up here too. No, I think that was it. I got that. I just want to check and make sure that I didn't miss anybody. Look, I think the movie industry, I think people still want to go to the movies. They still want to go to the pictures. They still want to go to the films. But our civilization, culturally, there's a huge shift that has happened in our culture over the last 20 years. And that shift is that movies and cinema are not as important a cultural and artistic force as they used to be. One, there's way too much content now. I mean, even I who have grown up since I was a little kid watching and worshiping movies, reading books about movies. Hell, if you want, so this came out this week, House of Psychotic Women, and this is a collection of 4 movies from Severin, none of which I'd ever seen. That is a companion piece to a book, an excellent book called House of Psychotic Women, a film book that is a female perspective on female exploitation films. You got to get it. If you want to get it, it's a great book. It's in hardcover. Get the new version, House of Psychotic Women. The problem is, nowadays, movies are not a cultural force. Like when I was growing up, we would have, even in Seattle, we'd have the Seattle International Film Festival, and I was seeing movies from all around the Pacific Rim. I was seeing movies from Europe. I was seeing movies from India. And when I started really watching, when I was 13 years old, I got a VCR. I was the first kid on my block, way back in the day. There was no Blockbuster yet. There was mom and pop video stores, and I was devouring any kinds of movies. And I was reading film books. I was reading books about Francois Truffaut, and I was reading Francois Truffaut he interviewed Hitchcock, and his interview with Hitchcock was published, and I must have read that book 100 times. And as a film fan, even at 13, I was watching everything. Nowadays, a lot of people, most people that I know, their diet, their cinema diet, their media diet is very limited in terms of what they're experiencing. Like, if I ask somebody about Michelangelo Antonioni's movies, my beloved Ennui trilogy, which is La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse. Well, when I was in film school back in the 80s, everybody knew who Antonioni was. Nowadays, I ask people who Michelangelo Antonioni is. I ask them about Red Desert. I ask about The Passenger with Jack Nicholson. Everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. They don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I own these movies, and nobody knows them. And it's not a criticism. It's just that movies have become much more what Jeffrey Wells was talking about how movies, going to church, that movies were about the basic human truths. And there was a lot of films that were very introspective. And I mean, getting movies on from Criterion, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, Beyond Suspicion, and the Decalogue, the Polish 10-part anthology series, The Decalogue, and you go back and you look, Krzysztof Kieslowski, Red, Blue, White, his 3 Colors trilogy, or The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which I just ordered from Amazon UK on 4K. I mean, half my movie collection, people look at it and go, "What are these?" And it's frustrating. It's frustrating I can't talk to people about half the movies I've seen because no one's seen them. And people don't watch them anymore. So in terms of where's cinema at, what we've had now is, it used to be, this is my own theory, of course, it used to be that I love science fiction, fantasy, and horror films. I have since I was a little kid. I would watch anything that had any scrap or morsel of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I didn't care if it was black and white. I didn't care if it was a silent movie. I didn't care if it was made in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Didn't care. I had to watch all of it. My goal was to watch every single science fiction, fantasy, and horror film made. There's Eastern Bloc and Russian science fiction films that I've never been able to see. I've never been able to get a print, never been able to get them on video, never. I've seen pictures in books. I've seen pictures in books for 50 years, and I can't get these movies. But I would watch anything and everything. Nowadays, I find it incredibly frustrating when I talk to people on, someone says, like, what's your favorite vampire movie? Or what's one of your favorite? And I go, oh my God, the Vampire Circus, one of the Hammer movies, or a Jean Rollin lesbian vampire film, like Fascination, or Daughters of Darkness or something. People look at me like I'm out of my mind. Nobody knows these movies anymore. It's not, I don't want to say that I'm a snob, but I also say that, pop culture has a shelf life of 20 years, that most people don't go back. You go back 20 years and people aren't watching, they watch new movies. But when home video started and whatever came out, I remember one of the first pre-recorded cassettes I got in the second wave. I had like 5 movies on pre-recorded cassette, but my parents would go and find things. Like my dad brings home this Allied Artists. It was on Allied Artists, and Allied Artists put out things like Alice, Sweet Alice. And my dad brings me home this tape, and this was back when videotapes were like $55. And he brought me home on Allied Artists, Crypt of the Living Dead. And I'm like, never heard of it. My dad's like, I don't know. I saw it, bought it for you. I'm like, why? I don't know why. It's pretty interesting. Crypt of the Living Dead. And I would watch anything. And my movie collection is rather eclectic. I've probably got, I don't know, between 3, I haven't counted lately, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 titles. I want to cull it down to 2,500, and a lot of them, I have a lot of obscurities and a lot of foreign films, but it's frustrating. So when James Cameron and Martin Scorsese and people are bitching about the fact that the studios are only making $150 million IP-driven films, what they're really talking about is the fact that cinema as an art form has taken a backseat to cinema as a business. Now, cinema has always been a business, but the margins on films were not nearly what they are now. I remember when James Cameron's Terminator 2 was the first movie that cost $100 million. And part of the reason was it was getting rushed into theaters. And that was 30 years ago. 91? And it was scandalous. But, you used to be able to make, Star Wars cost like between $9 and $11 million. Jaws, the movies cost big studio pictures were, I remember, I think Cameron's Aliens cost in $86 like $18 million to make. And I remember reading, I think it's Cinefex magazine, I read that he was married to Gail Ann Hurd at the time. He was only allowed 6 alien suits to make Aliens. So he had to make judicious use of his suits because that's all they had money for. And famously, there's the story when the salvage operation finds the Narcissus floating in space, where Ripley is the last survivor of the Starship Nostromo. When they go in there, there's this like floating blue laser that scans the inside of the Narcissus. And I remember reading that Gail Ann Hurd said, no, it's too expensive to hire that, to rent that laser. You can't have it unless you pay for it yourself. And James Cameron did. He's like, fine, I'll pay for it myself. But now movies are way more expensive. So what that has done is now, and another big problem is that the movies that Hollywood is making is no longer mostly for the local market. That's why there's less and less comedies being made theatrically, because now Hollywood is making movies for the whole planet. And the reason that they concentrate on action adventure and science fiction and spectacle films is because they translate well to around the world. Whether you're in Europe, whether you're in Asia, whether you're in East India, when you make a big Marvel movie, everyone understands it. You make a funny colloquial comedy, it doesn't translate well, so they don't make those comedies anymore. And nowadays, most movies make more money. These big tentpole movies make more money foreign than they do domestic. Very seldom do movies Look at the box office of the last 5 James Bond films. Not even 50% of their worldwide gross was made in the United States. So that's a big part of how the business has changed. So the movies that Hollywood is making and the Hollywood business model has turned to a worldwide market. But what that's done is you used to get movies, the movies I used to love was like literary adaptations like Hunt for Red October. Hunt for Red October, they can $65 million. That was a big budget movie in 1990. John McTiernan, coming off of Predator and Die Hard, makes Hunt for Red October. Tom Clancy book turned into a movie. That was a big hit. But I think that movie, worldwide, I don't know what it grossed, probably grossed around $350 million total. Well, that was monster hit back then, made for 65 and it makes $350 million worldwide. That's a really good business. But when a movie costs $200 million to make $1 billion worldwide, movie business has totally changed. And all the stories that they use, look at an erotic thriller like Fatal Attraction. That was a huge hit. Cultural zeitgeist movie. Huge hit. When was the last time you saw a movie like Fatal Attraction in the theaters that people were talking about? Or Indecent Proposal. Robert Redford propositions your wife. You know what? If you let me sleep with your wife, you can have $1 million. Would you do it? I mean, now there'd be all kinds of think pieces. The entire culture would have been enamored of this. But that doesn't happen anymore. So the movies that I grew up with, the reason I wanted to make movies, that has changed. And it's never going to go back. So the question about where do I think movies are going to be, it's just a different world. And another thing that has completely changed is now with the technology of cell phones and social media, people, the great human truths in life have been distilled down to 90-second TikTok videos. You have everybody, every person, from all walks of life, all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds. People are making videos themselves. And rather than going to the cinema and watch something in church, it used to be said, Francis Coppola talked about the fact that he was hoping that the democratization of technology would make it so the next Citizen Kane would be made by some 13-year-old girl in the Midwest in her basement. Well, what's interesting is maybe that 13-year-old girl is not making Citizen Kane. What she's making is 90-second TikTok videos that millions of people around the world will see. So that's changed as well. So the basic human truths, the reason that we went to be illuminated about our own existence in movie theaters from movies like I just got To Kill a Mockingbird, the 60th anniversary that movie on 4K. You might get a lot more out of watching TikTok videos that are from around the world than you did. And as much as I am loath to admit this, because making movies is really hard, and you can spend 3, 4, 5 years on a movie that's 90 minutes long, and it might not be as entertaining as 90 minutes flipping through TikTok videos or Facebook Reels or Instagram Reels, whatever. And even I would admit that that's the case. And I'm an old snob that loves movies. And we have new forms of entertainment and technology that did not exist before. And I hate to say this, but I think that movies were the great art form of the 20th century. Now, I think we're always going to have movies and narrative features. But look, the movies that used to have so much meaning to us have been turned into long-form 10-episode. I mean, I remember, like in the 80s, Korean cinema wasn't as vibrant in the 80s as it is recently. Over the last 20 years, Korean cinema has exploded. Whether you want to watch erotic thrillers, you want to watch cop movies, you want to watch monster movies, you want to watch horror movies, Korean cinema is knocking it out of the park. And I don't just mean like Parasite. There is so much great stuff going on in Korean cinema. It's really vibrant. And, they're not because they're making most of their movies for the local market. But man, if you want to delve into some really rich, diverse cinema in terms of Park Chan-wook's new movie just came out. And again, he made The Handmaiden, which has knocked me out. But I think is it called Permission to Leave? Something like that. But his new movie came out, and I can't wait to see it. So movies are just different now. They're just different. Things are different. And that's the evolution of culture. The problem that I have is that it seems like most of our culture has been tremendously dumbed down. The educational statistics in this country are pretty dismal. People don't want to do the work. Everybody would rather be mad at each other. And I feel that our civility and our culture is being diminished across the board because everybody wants things in quick 90-second bites, and they no longer want to take the time to really get to know one another and know each other. Sonny Dominguez sends in a tip. You can also send in tips. They're open. Sonny says, Latinx is the N-word to Latinos? What the fuck? Wrong. Many associate the word with woke culture. Perhaps that's a true source of complaints. The word is laughed at and given eye rolls, not being appropriated by the Latino culture as hoped. Hashtag stay squirting. Well, that was, it was very funny. It's very funny to me that Roberto Suarez, who was here in the chat, and Alex Montano, who created an all Spanish speaking show for this YouTube channel, and they created the word in they created Latinx men to be a play on it all. It was supposed to be playful, and yet there's all these people that come at me and say, I can't believe you titled it that. I'm like, oh, okay. So you're going to tell me to tell a Puerto Rican and a Mexican what they should call their Spanish-speaking show? It's such a bizarre, it's so weird that everybody wants to like police what everybody else is saying and doing. I mean, look, we have a time in history that's really great. We have more marginalized voices, and we've got more people speaking out and having platforms than ever before. And I think it's great. It's just too bad we all end up hating each other, which doesn't make any sense to me. We've got more communications technology. We can talk to people around the world in real time, wherever you want, and yet everyone's mad at each other. I mean, hell, we're sharing so much too. We should lean into that. But yeah, it's crazy stuff. Tom Jr. Jackson, who coined the phrase "we are all goof people," and indeed we are. That is the Post-Geek singularity. What is that? This is the community right now of people that are watching. You are all the Post-Geek singularity, and we are all goof people. It was very funny. Tom was writing something. I think he was writing "we're all good people," but it just came out as goof. You were all goof people. And I just thought it was so funny. I decided to adopt it as the slogan, the phrase. We've got "Together We Are One," which is for this show, but the overarching phrase of the entire channel is "we're all goof people." And indeed we are. And that's why we're all friends. We can all hang out here. Ryan McLeod says, "You've sold me on Picard Season 3. I'm catching up on missed live streams. Do we need to watch Seasons 1 and 2 to understand Season 3? I've avoided both." No, you do not. There's a few things that you can pick up along the way, but for the most part, you don't. And by the way, I have it on very good authority that as of today, there are other people besides myself that have seen all of Picard Season 3. There are other people. And one of them is a pretty big pundit. And there are other people in the YouTube space that also have seen it. So I'm no longer alone. Chad Van is it Syok or Sock? Chad Van Sock asks, thoughts if Shazam 2 outperforms Black Adam? Well, I would imagine Shazam 2 will outperform Black Adam because Black Adam was an unknown quantity. Sure, it had Dwayne Johnson in it, but I'm not going to count Black Adam out yet because it still has yet to open in China because they're in the midst of COVID lockdowns. But I think Black Adam still got some life in it. Its second weekend was Halloween weekend, which is traditionally a soft weekend at the box office. So perhaps, I'm hoping it'll do better. It'll do better. But Shazam should do better than Black Adam because now it's the second movie in a series. More people know it. I think it looks better. I don't love, like John loves Shazam. I didn't love Shazam. I liked it. I didn't love it. But anyway, I wanted to read a little bit of this article that Pauline Kael wrote, 23rd June 1980. And I wanted to read this. This is by Pauline Kael. Why are movies so bad, or the numbers? I know it's a pretty dense article. It's really long, and I won't read the whole thing. But I just want to read this. This is Pauline Kael, one of the great movie reviewers. And if you're a movie fan, you should go. I love, as I said, one of the last things I did with John Schnepp was we went to Movie World. I bought this big tome, this thick tome of her reviews. And I love going back and reading her old reviews to see if I agree with her. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Sometimes she loved movies that I was surprised she loved, and she hated movies I was surprised she hated. But here's this article. Why are movies so bad, or the numbers? From June 23rd, 1980, 42 years ago, Pauline Kael. The movies have been so rank the last couple of years that when I see people lining up to buy tickets, I sometimes think that the movies aren't drawing an audience, they're inheriting an audience. People just want to go to a movie. They're stung repeatedly, yet their desire for a good movie, for any movie, is so strong that all over the country they keep lining up. There's one God for all creation, but there must be a separate God for the movies, a producer said. How else can you explain their survival? An atmosphere of hope develops before big pictures release, and even after your friends tell you how bad it is, you can't quite believe it until you see it for yourself. The lines and the grosses tell us only that people are going to the movies, not that they're having a good time. Financially, the industry is healthy, so among the people at the top, there seems to be little recognition of what miserable shape movies are in. They think the grosses are proof that people are happy with what they're getting, just as TV executives think that the programs with the highest ratings are what TV viewers want, rather than what they'll settle for. A number of the new movie executives come from TV. These new executives don't necessarily see many movies themselves, and they rarely go to a theater. If, for the last couple of years, Hollywood couldn't seem to do anything right, it isn't that it was just a stretch of bad luck. It's the result of recent developments within the industry. And in all probability, it will get worse, not better. There have been few recent American movies worth lining up for. Last year, there was chiefly The Black Stallion, and this year, there is The Empire Strikes Back. The first was made under the aegis of Francis Ford Coppola. The second was financed by George Lucas, using his profits from Star Wars as a guarantee to obtain bank loans. One can say with fair confidence that neither The Black Stallion nor The Empire Strikes Back could have been made with such care for visual richness as imagination had they been... One can say with fair confidence that neither The Black Stallion nor The Empire Strikes Back could have been made with such care for visual richness and imagination had they been done under studio control. Even small films on traditional subjects are difficult to get financed at a studio if there are no parts for stars in them. Peter Yates, the director of Breaking Away, a graceful, unpredictable comedy that pleases and satisfies audiences, took the project to one studio after another for almost 6 years before he could get the backing for it. There are direct results when conglomerates take over movie companies. Heads of the conglomerates may be drawn into the movie business for the status implications, the opportunity to associate with the world famous. Some other conglomerate heads may be drawn in for the women too. A new social life beckons, and as they become social, people with great names approach them as equals, and famous stars and producers and writers and directors tell them they've heard from other studios about ideas they have for movies. The conglomerate heads become indignant that the studios they run have passed on these wonderful projects, and the next day they're on the phone raising hell with the studio bosses. Very soon they're likely to be directors, and they're likely to be directors suggesting material to them, talking to actors and company executives what projects should be developed. How bad is the judgment of the conglomerate heads? Very bad. They haven't grown up in show business milieu. They don't have the instincts or the information of those who have lived and sweated movies for many years. Neither do most of the current studio bosses. The corporate heads may be business geniuses, but as far as movies are concerned, have virgin instincts. Ideas that are new to them and take them by storm away have failed grossly dozens of times, but they feel that they are creative people. How else could they have made so much money and be in positions to advise artists what to do? Who is to tell them no? Within a very short time, they are in fact, though not in title, running the studio. They turn up compliant executives who will settle for the title and not fight for the authority or for their own tastes, if in fact they have any. The conglomerate heads find these compliant executives amongst lawyers and agents, amongst television executives, and in the lower echelons of the companies they've taken over. Generally, these studio executives reserve with all their enthusiasm for movies that have made money. Those are the only movies they like. When a director or writer talks to them and tries to suggest the kind of movie he has in mind by using a comparison, they may stare at him blankly. They are usually law school or business school graduates. They have no frame of reference. Worse, they have no shame about not knowing anything about movies. From their point of view, such knowledge is not essential to their work. Their talent is being able to anticipate their superiors' opinions in meetings. They show a sixth sense for guessing what the most powerful person wants to hear, and if they ever guess wrong, they know how to shift gears without a tremor. So the movie companies wind up with top production executives whose interests in movies rarely extends beyond the selling possibilities. They could be selling neckties just as well as movies, except they're drawn to the glamour and the power. Now, that's only the first two sections of this article. But tell me, aside from a little bit of language, that isn't exactly what you hear all the time about the movie industry right now. This was written 42 years ago, and it's still the same shit. By the way, I'm going to put this article. This is a great article. I really advise you read it all. It's not beyond a paywall, but the world is the same. It's the same as it ever was, and which is really, when you think about it, quite amazing. It hasn't changed. Nowadays, there's just a lot more money involved. And as I've often pointed out, it's all Ivy League business school people that are running the movie business. Because there's so much money involved, that's who corporations, that's what corporations hire. It's a smart move, smart play. So, Insematic 101 says, respect for the answer. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Our own Alex Detman, who is a moderator here. Alex, thank you, Alex. Sends in a very generous super chat. Thank you very much. 2, actually. Alex says, Rob, for me personally, I love a good villain in a good movie, no matter what the genre may be. I believe that a great villain can make a decent movie even better. Who are some of your favorite villains? Well, as I've said this before, again, you're going to look at me, people are going to be like, what? I love femme fatales. I love evil females. Love them. Sharon Stone as Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct. Kathleen Turner in Body Heat. One of my favorites. Anne Baxter from 1950s Best Picture winning All About Eve. If you guys want to see, here's a great double feature. I challenge you. Both of these movies are black and white. Both of them have incredible screenplays, but they're both one's about the theater, Broadway, one is about movie making. All About Eve is one of them. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I think it's one of the best screenplays ever written. It's wildly entertaining from the beginning, George Saunders voiceover, and Sunset Boulevard. Sunset Boulevard. By the way, Sunset Boulevard has a character, Norma Desmond, you all need to know. No movie fan worth their salt has not seen Sunset Boulevard. You got to see Sunset Boulevard. Those are some of my favorite villains. Obviously, modern villains. Hans Gruber, leader of the West German Volksfrei movement. I mean, come on, Die Hard, one of the great villains of all time. I think Renee Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great modern villain. Of course, Darth Vader. But I like my villains a little bit more nuanced. I like Bond villains. I liked Auric Goldfinger. He was great. And no, there's so many great villains. So many great villains. Movies are only as good as their villains. If you don't have a movie that has a great villain, I don't know what to tell you. But off the top of my head, Alex, there you go. Alex goes on to say, just a few for me would be Heath Ledger's Joker, great villain. Gary Oldman is Stansfield from The Professional, great villain. Alan Rickman is the great Hans Gruber. Tom Cruise as Vincent in Collateral, great villain. Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus are just a few of mine. Those are great. Gladiator is one of my favorite movies of all time. The lovely Connie Sang is here and says, Rob, sorry I missed the Halloween festivities on your channel. I was recovering from last year. Connie, did you see Martyrs? Inquiring minds want to know. I thought I'd hear from you immediately if you had seen it. But yeah, so this Pauline Kael article, check it out. Sonny Dominguez sends in a tip. By the way, if you want to send in a tip instead of a super chat or something, the tip link is in the description. Sonny says, if movies are church, then Robservations is my Bible study, making you a clergy of celluloid, the theologian of theatrical. I like that, the theologian of theatrical. That is great. Here is my title. Here's my tithe. Here's my tithe. I like that. By the way, can I just say that as a religion major from Baylor? Baylor. You're Baylor, not Baylor. I was thinking Bajor. Baylor. You still doing that top 10 recommendations for us to watch? Yes. I'm going to do 10 for you. Robservations 10 for you is going to be 10 things you should watch. I'm going to make 10-minute videos. That is going to happen. I'm still going to do that, Sonny. Don't you worry. And by the way, thanks for the kind comments. That's very nice of you to say. Eyes Only became a new member. And Kevin Rubio says, Sandman renewed. How many times have you had to change your pants this evening? Well, Kevin, I usually retire to the bathroom if I have to, change my pants or do anything untoward. But yeah, I let's just say I've been aroused walking around all evening. Very excited about the Sandman being renewed. It is fantastic. As you can see, I have two there's a Sandman statue. There's the absolute Sandman statue, and there's, I don't know which one of these I'd forget which one. I've moved many times, and my Sandman statues have disintegrated over the years. Many have been broken, which is sad. Boat sends in a super chat and says, hi, I would say I appreciate your thoughts on films and scripts, but I have to say, you can't appreciate it until you've read it in the original Klingon. Boat, kudos to you for referencing Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Of course, that's from that dinner scene. Dach, bech, kach, bech, whatever. To be or not to be. By the way, that was nonsensical Klingon. I do not know how to speak Klingon. That's the best I can do. But, the real question that, the thing that I'm constantly battling is, I love movies, and I love the art of making movies. It's whatever part of it. I started out, the first movie I ever worked on was in the summer of 1989. I was the art department production assistant on Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And then I went to work. I worked in makeup effects. I worked on Sleepwalkers, Mick Garris's Sleepwalkers. I worked on Army of Darkness. It was fun, and I love every aspect of making movies and television. It's, but it means something. Jeff Yerke, the Yerk Man, as in Jeff Yerke and Mrs. Yerke, sends in a super sticker. Thank you for that, Mr. Yerke. How are you? How's your back, by the way? And how is the lovely Mrs. Y? Please say hello. Thomas Logan has become a member. So remember, everybody, there is a member call this weekend. I send out a link on the community tab, and you'll get a link to come in. It's fun. I love the membership calls. We have people from all over the world hanging out, which is a lot of fun, and talking. It's great fun to do that. So that's always something good to do. Kenneth Colton says, Rob, I am damn comfy sitting here in my new Robservations hoodie, very snugly. 8 days until Black Panther 2. You know what? I am actually wearing a Robservatory hoodie. You can see right there, the Robservatory. My friend Bill Hunt made these, which is pretty cool. These are very, I'm glad that we're finally back into sweatshirt weather so I can enjoy them. Which is great. Alex Detman goes on to say, another great villain for me would be Boyd Holbrook's incarnation of the Corinthian in The Sandman. Man, that was so good. He was great as the Corinthian. Of course, another thing that they changed in the Sandman series is they made the Corinthian a character that was weaved throughout the series, the first season, which I thought was a great change. Really, really well done. A Silly Goose says, Rob, I need some sci-fi book recommendations. You recently mentioned Neuromancer, The Left Hand of Darkness, and The Three-Body Problem. Any more? Oh my God. Okay, where to begin? I say this all the time. People have heard me say this a million times, but I stand by it. Dan Simmons is one of my favorite writers, and you have to read the Hyperion Cantos. Now, the book, there's two books, Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion. It was one book that his publishers made him split in half. Hyperion's great. It's like the Canterbury Tales in outer space. It's fantastic. There's another book. It's pretty dense, but I love it anyway. It's by a guy named Peter Watts called Blind Sight. It's pretty hardcore science fiction, and it is a little dense, but it's a really, really great book. I really like that. If you have not read Cyberpunk, The Peripheral, William Gibson's The Peripheral has been adapted. It's so funny. It's so funny to me that, I understand, again, here's another thing I don't get. I know it's books, but to me, the new show with Chloe Grace Moretz, The Peripheral, which I actually have right up on the shelf, was written by William Gibson, the man who coined the phrase cyberpunk, when he wrote his famous book Neuromancer, which came out in 1984. But my favorite cyberpunk book, and if you read it, you're going to see how much has been stolen, not just from Neuromancer, but Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. If you like Ready Player One, that's like the YA version of Snow Crash. Not to be, I don't want to offend anyone, but Snow Crash is one of my favorite books I ever read. So you should check that out. So that's those are some good recommendations. I'm a big Stephen Baxter fan, and his Manifold books, Manifold Space and Manifold Time, are very good. There's a third one, Manifold Origin, that I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as Manifold Space and Manifold Time. What's really interesting about Manifold Space and Manifold Time is they've got the same characters in them, not all the same, and they're like, it's almost like you're reading an alternate universe version of one of the books. So check that out, Stephen Baxter. He also wrote if you've read H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, Stephen Baxter wrote a sequel to it called The Time Ships that's got some mind-blowing shit in it, if you like time travel. And even if you haven't read The Time Machine, watch the original, when it came out in 1960, with Yvette Mimay as Weena and Rod Taylor. Watch the 1960s Time Machine. It's a little quaint, but then read Stephen Baxter's The Time Ships, because it's dope. And he also wrote a sequel. He wrote a sequel to War of the Worlds. That's pretty great. Let's see, what do I have it up there? It's up there somewhere. And then of course I'm a big, if you want to okay, here's a great recommendation. It's two books, and I tell this all the time, and I want to make these books into a movie so goddamn bad, but they'll never get made into a movie. It actually should be a series. It's by Greg Bear. And it's just two books. The first book is called The Forge of God, and the second book is called Anvil of Stars. And Anvil of Stars is one of my favorite science fiction books, but you can read them both. So here, I'll give you the premise. So there is, out in the universe somewhere, there is a hidden alien race that, in order to prevent anyone else from rising up and taking their place or proving to be a threat, this alien race that's hidden somewhere in the universe create what are called von Neumann machines, which are self-replicating machines that they sent out into the universe. And these von Neumann machines seek out emerging technologically advanced life forms like humanity. And if these races have the potential to rise up and join the community amongst the stars and maybe rival this alien race, these von Neumann machines recognize these planets, and what they do is they drop these devices like down into the oceans, and they bore into the core of the planet, and they whip through the core, and they basically wind down over the course of a year, and at the end of the year they blow up the planet, destroying the civilization, so it won't eventually, thousands of years hence, rise up to compete with this mysterious civilization. At the same time, there's a group of benevolent aliens like the United Federation of Planets, but Earth's not a part of it. And they are trying to prevent the destruction of these races. So the Forge of God is about Earth. It's set on Earth, and it's about all these people on Earth. And what the people of Earth don't know is these von Neumann machines have been dropped into Earth's core, and there's only a year left before the Earth is destroyed. And these aliens, these benevolent aliens, come down and they try and save as much of Earth culture as possible. That's the first book. I won't tell you what happens, but in the second book, I can't really tell you what the second book's about without ruining the ending of the first book. The second book, Anvil of Stars, is basically about the search for this alien race that's sending out these machines. And the way trust me, I mean, you'll tear through these books. They're so good. So it's Greg Bear, The Forge of God, and Anvil of Stars. I want to make Anvil of Stars into a 7-season series. And the problem is they've tried to do this before. But everybody who's ever tried to do, and I've read a number of Mike Medavoy's Phoenix Pictures had the rights. They probably bought the rights to these books. They've been trying to develop these books. Here's the problem with a lot of books. They are purchased by a company, and the company keeps re-upping the option, and they keep paying for screenplays to be written about on these properties. So sometimes, and they have to pay a screenwriter each time. So what ends up happening is like a project like The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars ends up having what's called money against it. So a company might have spent literally millions of dollars to develop properties like the remake of Logan's Run. God only knows. Joel Silver was trying to develop a new version of Logan's Run. They have had so many writers work on this property, they end up having millions of dollars against the project. So in order to make the movie, they have to pay off all the money that's already been spent developing the project. That becomes part of the budget, and it can become really cost prohibitive. And Mike Medavoy's Phoenix Pictures had The Forge of God, and everybody really wants to make Anvil of Stars because that's the movie to make. It could be if Anvil of Stars was made properly, and I think it should be done as a series, it could be one of the great science fiction series of all time. It really could be. And I can't explain it. You just have to read it for yourself. You can't know what Anvil of Stars is. You just have to experience for yourself. Because it's so fascinating. It's got a great twist in the middle. I love it so much. But everybody who tries to adapt Anvil of Stars, they also figure they have to do The Forge of God first. Fuck it. I'll just tell you. It won't ruin the experience. Earth is destroyed at the end of The Forge of God. Earth is destroyed. The planet explodes. You don't need... The Forge of God as a book is really interesting. So don't read just Anvil of Stars. Read The Forge of God and then read Anvil of Stars. But just you'll know right away that the Earth is lost at the end of that book. That's how you begin, right? You could do like the opposite of Contact. I thought about making these movies for so long. And seriously, like I could tell you everything about this, but I'll refrain. But imagine, here's the opening of Anvil of Stars, which would be the second book. You don't need the first book. But imagine... if you've seen Contact, how in Contact this camera pulls out and follows the radio signal away from Earth. Imagine going into Earth and we come up on beautiful Earth in space, silent, and then we just see horrible, literally the Earth in slow motion just comes apart. Right? And like in a single shot. And it's got to be one of the greatest effect shots ever done. Continents, you see them just coming apart and exploding. And then in the same shot, the camera pulls back as the debris of the planet is coming at you. And the camera would move, and it finds a gigantic, like, alien arc that has these crystalline windows. And you see thousands of human beings watching the destruction of Earth. Us watching the destruction of Earth. And the destruction is lit up it's reflecting off the light, and you just see thousands of people. That's the opening shot of the movie. That's Anvil of Stars. But anyway, or the TV show. There you go. So, anyway, everyone's going, what are you talking about? I know. Anyway, I just tell you, go get Greg Bear's The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars. Go read those books and get back to me. So there you go, a silly goose. Don't get me wound up because I could sit there. I just will turn and look on my shelves. Another book, another movie I really want to make, another science fiction movie I really want to make. Robert Charles Wilson, a Canadian hard science fiction writer, but I call him the Stephen King of Canada. Robert Charles Wilson is the Stephen King of Canada because what Stephen King did for horror, how he took it out of the mountains of, say, Carpathia or something, and he made it about the little crazy chick that lives down at the end of your street, Carrie White. She's going to kill everybody at prom. Robert Charles Wilson turned your neighborhood could be the beginning of some gigantic, heady sci-fi story. He had two books that I think would make great movies or shows, Mysterium and The Harvest. But don't make The Harvest because I want to make that. I've wanted to make that book since the early 90s when I first read it. So there you go. RRTNZ. How you doing, buddy? Hail, Bob. Neuromancer is my top 5 go-to book. Will it ever get an adaptation that does it justice? My humble opinion, a series makes more sense than a film. Cheers. You know what? The whole thing here's my problem with Neuromancer. Neuromancer came out in 1984, and so much of Neuromancer has been pilfered by other movies. And I think, and unfortunately, and I feel this might be true of Snow Crash as well, it's between video games and movies, all of this early cyberpunk stuff has all been lifted, so people... I don't know if it's going to be fresh enough. I mean, I love Neuromancer, and I love, what was that, like Count Zero and Mona Lisa Overdrive and all that early stuff. I mean, I thought it was great. I love William Gibson's early stuff like that, but I don't know if you could do that. So, Thomas Logan says, Rob, put me down for $300 toward the Free Enterprise remastered special edition 4K featuring a 7-minute newly shot prologue co-starring Dieter Bastian. When do you plan on starting the Kickstarter? Well, you know what, Thomas? I'd have to ask the owner of the movie if I could do something like that. We'd have to partner up, but I'll put you down for $300. That's very generous. You'll get all the good perks, but I can't retcon Dieter Bastian into the movie, much as I might like to. Yeah. That could be funny. By the way, thank you for generously supporting the channel in such a fashion. I appreciate that. It's fun. Can you see I get all excited about talking about books? And ask me about horror novels too. You want to read a great horror novel that's a lot of fun? And why am I drawing a blank on his name as I look up? God, I hate when I forget the author's names. A book. It's called The Last Werewolf, and Glenn Duncan, by Glenn Duncan. The Last Werewolf. It's one of 3 books, but when I first read The Last Werewolf, it was only one book. It's now 3 books. Maybe it's a 4th book, but if you like werewolf books, it's a werewolf story meets James Bond, meets kind of the X-Files sort of. It's good. Last Werewolf's good. Again, it's a book that's owned by Ridley Scott's company. Scott Free. Where the hell's that book? Come on, guys. Make The Last Werewolf. What's up? Go make that. It'd be great. Yeah, a friend of the channel, Ray Garton, read his book, Live Girls. Vampires and Strippers. What's not to love? Kenneth Colton says, The Cabin at the End of the World. Tell me about that book, Rob. Well, Ken, I'll tell you. So for those of you who don't know, M. Night Shyamalan's new book is called A Knock at the Cabin. It's based on a book called The Cabin at the End of the World. And so the storyline is about two guys and their adoptive daughter and their family. And these 2 guys go to this cabin in the woods. And if you watch the trailer, I don't want to ruin anything. Okay, so these people arrive at their cabin and they basically say, the apocalypse is coming and you are able to prevent, you will be able to prevent the end of the world, but you have to make a choice. and it goes from there. And it's fucking harrowing. And I'm just gonna say that the ending of the book was, and it kind of left you a little. It was a little open ended for my taste, but it was a one sitting book. It was one of those books that I read in one sitting. I'll tell you, this is an interesting. So Grant Morrison, the great comic writer, he has his first book out, Luda. This just came out. I just got this, Luda, and I it's let me read what this is about. A drag queen initiates her protege into the magical arts in this phantasmagoric epic from the legendary comics writer and New York best-selling author. Lucy LeBang is a star. For decades, this flamboyant drag artist has cast a spell over screen and stage. Now she's the leading lady in a smash hit musical. But as time takes its toll, Lucy fears her star is beginning to dim. When Lucy's co-star meets with a mysterious accident, a new ingenue shimmers onto the scene, Luda, whose fantastical beauty and sinister charm infatuate Lucy immediately, and who bears a striking resemblance to Lucy herself at a much younger age. Luda begs Lucy to share the secrets of her stardom and to reveal the hidden tricks of her trade. For Lucy LeBang is a mistress of the glamour, a mysterious discipline that draws on sex, drugs, and the occult for its trans-like transformative effects. But as Lucy tutors her young protege, their fellow actors and crew members begin meeting with untimely ends. Now Lucy wonders if Luda has mastered the glamour all too well and exploited it to achieve her dark ambitions. Come on, man, this shit is right up my alley. I had to get this. Plus, it's Grant Morrison. I'll read any horror novel of any kind. So there you go. And for you Cormac McCarthy fans, The Passenger just came out. Got to read this too. What else do I have? I have another book down here, What else do I have? Oh, yeah. Alan Moore's new book. Speaking of comic writers, Alan Moore's new book of short stories, Illuminations. So there you go. You know it's on my shelf. Anyway, so there you go, Kenneth Colton. I don't know what to tell you. There's too many books in here. People are, but I'm always reading something. There's books all over the place. So, yeah. But anyway, I don't know what else to say. So, did I put the? I think I put the Pauline Kael article. If I didn't, I'm going to do it again. Let me do it again for you, lovely folks. And here's that Pauline Kael article that I read. I feel like this Robservations episode might have gotten a little off the rails. Charlie the Unicorn says, we park our books in the same shelf. It's true. Harold Rand says, Rob, what's the most insane, bizarre, out there movie you own that nobody and their mother has ever heard of? Give me that real deep cut. It's funny that you say that, because I'll tell you, this box set, The House of Psychotic Women, has movies in it that I'd never heard of. I just got this. This just came out from Severin, and one of these movies I've never heard of stars Elizabeth Taylor. Now let me show you these. I mean, again, this is just something I just got. So this movie, I Like Bats, is an 80s horror film. This is the first time this movie's ever been on disc in North America. I'd never heard of this movie before. Directed and co-written by Grzegorz Warshot, the Polish actor best known for his performance in Three Colors White. This 1985 production combines splashes of an absurdist black comedy with jolts of old-school gothic horror for a slyly contemporary take on the female bloodsucker mythos. A Polish actress who I don't want to destroy her name stars as a happily single young vampire who works in her aunt's curio shop, when not feeding on various suitors and sleazebags. But when she falls for a handsome psychiatrist, she'll discover that no affliction is more horrific than love. So there you go. I Like Bats. That's one. Never heard of that. Identikit. Identikit. This is the Elizabeth Taylor movie. In what remains the most obscure, bizarre, and wildly misunderstood film of her entire career, and perhaps even 70s Italian cinema, Elizabeth Taylor stars as a disturbed woman who arrives in Rome to find a city fragmented by autocratic law, leftist violence, and her own increasingly unhinged mission to find the most dangerous liaison of all. Academy Award nominee Ian Bannon and Andy Warhol co-star in this unique hallucinatory neo-noir. Hey, what can I tell you? Here's one. The Other Side of the Underneath by Jane Arden. This is part of this book. It gets 5 stars. It's been called harrowing, seriously disturbing, and part documentary, part primal scream. More than a half century later, it remains all of that and more. In 1972, screenwriter, feminist, radical theater icon Jane Arden adapted her own multimedia stage production, A New Communion for Freaks, Prophets, and Witches, into a nightmarish exploration of reason, chaos, and her own battles with mental illness, unlike anything audience has ever seen before or since. Anne Lynn, renowned visual artist Penny Slinger, and Arden herself star in the only British feature of the 1970s, solo directed by a woman and recently restored in 2K by the British Film Institute. So there you go. I don't know if that answers your entire question, but hey, those are the weirdest movies I got this week. And again, as I said, these films are actually in conjunction with a book of the same name called The House of Psychotic Woman, which is an overview of female exploitation films, which the book is great. So I would suggest getting that book as well. So I don't know if those are the craziest movies, but those are pretty weird. Ron C. says, hello, Rob. Good to see you back during the weeknights. Villains I've enjoyed from the past. 1994's Dune. 84's Dune. You mean Kenneth McMillan as Vladimir Harkonnen, and 1990's Goodfellas. Joe Pesci as Mobster Tommy. Hope you continue burning the midnight oil. So there you go. Ryan Landis says Identikit is also called The Driver's Seat. Well, there you go. I've never seen him, so I'm looking forward to watching these movies. RRTNZ says, talking about Morrison, what's your take on his assertion that the Wachowskis ripped off Invisibles to make The Matrix? I see where he's coming from. Oh, I absolutely. Look, The Matrix there's so many different influences. I don't think they just ripped off Invisibles. I think that they borrowed certain philosophical concepts that Morrison took from as well. So, yeah. So that's it. Red Comet asks if I've ever finished watching Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway. I have not. I watched the first episode and I haven't. You know what? Because I watched it streaming, and I love to buy the Gundam sets and then watch them all. I'm just a disc snob. What can I say? Darth Plato says Harkonnen. You mean not Harkonnen, like they said in Villeneuve's Dune? I always said Harkonnen too until I saw Villeneuve's Dune, and I'm like, everyone said Harkonnen. I'm like, is it Harkonnen? I always thought it was Baron Harkonnen. That I, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, encompasses his doom. But, who knows? But the Harkonnens, what can I say? I can't wait to see the second part of that, too. So, hey. But anyway, so the Invisibles, Uzumaki. Wow. Ryan, you guys in the chat, you guys are, I'll tell you about Uzumaki. Uzumaki is a movie I have on DVD that I need to get on Blu-ray. Uzumaki's good. I like Uzumaki. Is it Spiral in English or whatever? I like that film. There was a lot of I was really into Japanese exploitation movies for a while, especially in the late 90s, early aughts. There was a lot of really interesting stuff. So, yeah. I really liked a lot of that stuff. And that's what I was. There's so much good stuff out there. See, I love people in this chat. You guys are good. I didn't realize that. First of all, I didn't realize that Identicate was called something else, and then it was on Shudder. See, I got to catch up with this stuff. I didn't know that. That's good. You guys are hilarious. Oh, Roberto Suarez asks. He says it's the Day of the Dead. Where's Mexican Iron Man? Well, for those of okay, I'll bring it out. I was gonna show it, but I was gonna save it. But so, Mexican Iron Man, who many of you might know from Midnight's Edge or Doomcock's channel or whatever, he's a friend of mine, Mike, and he said like a year ago, he mentioned. Oh wait, is this upside down? It is upside down. I get this in the mail the other day. And this is a hot toy, but it's been completely modified. And I'll show you. I was blown away by this. So, Mexican Iron Man had an artist make 3 of these. There are 3 of these in existence. And now, if you guys know anything about hot toys, you know that they're not cheap. And the die-cast Iron Man figures are expensive. And this is a modified. This is actually Mexican Iron Man. This is a die-cast hot toy Iron Man figure. It lights up, but I'd have to put all the I mean, this is not Tony Stark. Mexican Iron Man has a Mexican in it. And this entire thing was modified. It even comes with a sombrero. And let me put this over here. And it's this could be one of my favorite Hot Toys figures. An actual Mexican Iron Man. I got to pop that on there. It's a little heavy. An actual Mexican Iron Man figure for the Day of the Dead. And this is unbelievable. It really is. And it even has a I won't take it out, but it even has a stand where Mike, Mexican Iron Man, recorded voices. I mean, this might be one of the greatest gifts I've ever received, to be honest, because, man, there's only 3 of these in existence. Mike himself has one, Doomcock has one, and I have one. Although Mike said mine's the best painted. I mean, the paint ops are incredible on this. And what colors? The only thing that Mexican Iron Man does not have is immigration papers. So there you go. Maybe he's here illegally. Mexico by way of Hong Kong, by way of Hot Toys. But yes, this could very well be one of the greatest things I own. So, thank you, Mike. This is great. I'm going to do a full unboxing. I'm going to make a video of this because it needs to be immortalized. It's too cool not to be. Man, do I love this thing. It is absolutely fantastic. And for the Day of the Dead, we will celebrate with Mexican Iron Man. Fantastic. Which is great. That's kind of neat. I love this thing. I love Mexican Iron Man. Well, so listen, I got to do some work. I got to get another Designing Hollywood out. The next Designing Hollywood is hilarious. It's Rob Weiss, who was one of the creators of Ballers, one of the executive producers of Ballers, and Entourage. And he also directed, his debut movie was a film in the early 90s called Amongst Friends. So I'm going to be doing that. And Charlie the Unicorn said, get a man with no name poncho for him. I totally am going to get. I'm totally going to get a poncho for him. I just need to do that. I got to find somebody's got to make one. So I will definitely get. Darth Plato says definitely a cooler toy than the Freddie Mercury doll. What are you talking about? This is my band. This is my. How can you? Don't be dissing on my. This is my 6-scale band. I got Elvis. I got Freddie Mercury. I got Bowie. I got Prince. I got Jimi Hendrix, and I got John Lennon. Come on, man. And you know who they're putting out next? Kurt Cobain. That's right. Gonna get Kurt Cobain. I love my 6-scale band. What are you talking about? Don't be dissing on Freddie. That is, by the way, that is a great. It's not. I had to get the. It was just the head sculpt and the clothes, but the from Wembley Stadium. But the head sculpt's incredible on that figure. So there you go. Well, kids, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I should probably get the heck off of this channel. Jaimin D says Messiah Kato in Origami as Origami, one of the most alluring villains. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I have not seen that. Messiah Kato in Origami as Origami. I will have to. You know what? Why don't I take a gander? Let me look that up, and let me just see how fetching. So we shall see. Oh, you know what? Maybe that link, it wasn't working. I don't think it was working, to be honest. Let me try this again. Let me put this Pauline Kael article in the chat. There's the whole thing. Now you've got the whole document in the chat. So let me see. now that you've got the article, let me look this up because I don't know this. So I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out for you. Origami, the raging god of battle. Let's see. Yeah, he's a badass, man. Oh, I'll watch this. Oh, I've seen. You know what? I haven't seen this movie, but I know this movie. Yeah, Origami. Okay, and you know what? You can get it. It's on realgood.com, and they have it. I can watch it. I can play it on TV. So I will. I'll check that out. I've seen the images from this. I just don't know the movie. Anyway, on that note, I am going to jump off. I'm going to jump off. I want to thank everybody for supporting this channel via Super Chats and Tips. There will be a membership call this weekend for members, which will be a lot of fun to do. Thanks everybody for asking good questions. I appreciate it. And again, your Super Chats and Tips are most welcome. And you can write me letters. You could send me letters to postgeeksingularity.com. Go to the website, send me letters there, and normally I read letters on the show. AK Films from India says, hey, Rob, one of your viewers from India. Always admire your thoughts and love for movies. Just wanted to ask any new projects you're working on. Ooh, I am. I am, as a matter of fact, I'm finishing it up. It's a feature film called The White Devils, and it's all done. I've been doing some post work on it, and it is based on a pretty famous play by a South African playwright, and it deals with the consequences of oppression and bad things. And that's the latest thing I'm working on. I have a script that I just finished that I would like to direct. And, of course, Dota, Dragon's Blood, Season 3, the final season dropped in August on Netflix. So if you like adult anime and you're a fantasy fan, Dota, Dragon's Blood, I was the animatic editor of all 3 seasons. So you can go watch that on Netflix if you haven't already seen it. It's pretty cool. I think you'll dig it. It's pretty great. So I appreciate you asking, AK Films. And on that note, I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Roberto Suarez. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson. I want to thank Alex Detman for being you guys. So thanks for that. And on that note, I would say this. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better night. And if you haven't seen it, watch The Sandman. And if you want to read great science fiction novels, read Dan Simmons' Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion, and read Greg Bear's The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars. And hell, read The Three-Body Problem, and read Blindside by Peter Watts, and read Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson. Read them all and get back to me.